The accounts didn't disappear all at once. That would have been obvious. Suspicious. Too loud. Instead, they faded the way a city fades at dawn, one light off here, another there, until suddenly the skyline felt wrong and no one could say exactly when it changed. Menglong's archive was the first to go quiet. Not deleted. Not suspended. Just hollowed. Photos still loaded, but captions were gone. Comments froze mid-conversation. Likes remained, but the names behind them dissolved into grey placeholders, as if the people who had loved him had been quietly removed from existence. Then Xin Qi noticed her drafts were missing. Not posted drafts, saved ones. Private. Thoughts she'd never shared. Messages she'd written to Yoon and never sent. They were gone, leaving behind blank folders that refreshed endlessly, like a mouth trying to remember how to speak. She checked the timestamps. All the deletions clustered around 1 hour. 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. The same hour as the corridor footage. The same hour as the freight elevator. The same hour Yoon was last seen standing. Lin didn't post about it. She understood the rules by then. Instead, she opened an old device she hadn't touched in years, a phone Yoon once joked was too stupid to be surveilled. It powered on slowly, screen flickering like a reluctant witness. There it was. A message from Yoon, time-stamped days before everything unraveled. "If my accounts go quiet," he had written, "don't fill the silence. Map it." The phrase echoed through her chest. Map it. Lin began screenshotting absences. She catalogued what was missing instead of what remained, friends whose profiles no longer resolved, comments that now read content unavailable, reposts that led nowhere. Patterns emerged quickly. Anyone who had interacted with Yoon in the final week was being erased in stages. Soft deletions. Algorithmic mercy. She cross-referenced with public data and felt the floor drop out beneath her. It wasn't just Yoon. It was the network around him. The vanishing accounts weren't punishment. They were containment. Elsewhere, the public noticed too. Fans searched for old clips only to find broken links. Interviews that had existed for years now returned error messages. A livestream Yoon had once done with Xin Qi, casual, unremarkable at the time, was suddenly unrecoverable as if it had never happened. Except someone had saved it. A low-resolution copy surfaced, grainy and cropped. In it, Yoon laughed easily, relaxed in a way he never was later. Lin teased him about his habit of speaking in riddles. "You always act like you're leaving clues," she said. Yoon smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Only because people don't listen unless they think it's a game. That line replayed everywhere. People began to understand the accounts weren't vanishing randomly. They were being edited out of the future. A former platform engineer, anonymous, shaking, precise, posted a thread explaining how it could be done. Not deletions. Reindexing. Deprioritization. Shadow permissions revoked silently, without triggering alerts. "You don't erase a person," the engineer wrote. "You make them unsearchable." The implications were devastating. Xin Qi's follower count hadn't dropped. Her reach had. Posts published but never traveled. Messages sent but never arrived. Her voice existed in a vacuum carefully engineered to feel normal from the inside. The loneliness of it almost broke her. Almost. Then she noticed something strange. One post, just one, refused to disappear. A photo Yoon had tagged her in months earlier. Blurry. Taken from behind. Two shadows stretching long across concrete at sunset. No caption. No likes. No comments. Yet it remained. She zoomed in until the pixels broke apart. On the wall ahead of their shadows, faint but deliberate, were 4 scratches and one longer line. The same pattern. The same rhythm. Lin felt it then, the certainty. Yoon had known the accounts would vanish. So he'd anchored himself to something older than platforms. Images cached by strangers. Copies saved without intention. Memory stored in human hands. She did something dangerous next. She logged into an old account under a forgotten alias and posted nothing but screenshots of absence. Blank profiles. Broken links. Empty replies. She titled the thread simply, "Who decides what disappears?" It spread faster than anything else had. Because it wasn't accusatory. It was observational. And observation was harder to silence. People began checking their own histories. They noticed replies to Yoon that now led nowhere. Notifications that referenced content no longer accessible. The shape of the erasure revealed itself through collective comparison. Someone coined a phrase that stuck. Digital abduction. Meanwhile, inside the shadow infrastructure, alarms flared again. The strategy had been to remove Yoon quietly, then cauterize his influence by thinning the web around him. They hadn't accounted for Lin. Because Lin didn't fight the deletion. She traced it. She noticed the deletions followed specific interactions, keywords, shared locations, even shared jokes. The goodbye song resurfaced again, and this time people noticed something new in the waveform. A buried phrase, repeated at low volume beneath the melody. Don't follow the noise. Follow the gaps. That was when Lin released the archive. Not a dump. A map. A visual network showing how Yoon's presence had been systematically reduced over time, nodes dimming, connections severed, until only isolated points remained. The final nodes. The corridor camera. The taxi footage. The elevator frame. The shadows photo. Places, not people. Proof that the system erased voices first, then contexts, then tried, and failed, to erase evidence. The backlash was unlike anything before it. People weren't angry. They were unsettled. Because if Yoon's digital life could be hollowed out so cleanly, so quietly, then disappearance was no longer dramatic. It was procedural. Xin Qi finally broke her silence with a single sentence. They didn't delete him. They replaced him with silence and hoped no one would notice. That sentence became a rallying cry. Screens filled with restored fragments, mirrored uploads, archived clips, screenshots saved by accident. Yoon's presence reassembled itself imperfectly but unmistakably, like a face remembered after a long illness. The organization moved too late. Every attempt to suppress now created a new artifact. Every vanished account triggered 3 more backups. The absence itself became the signal. And Lin understood then what Yoon had trusted her to do. Not to shout. Not to accuse. But to keep the record incomplete in a way that demanded attention. In the end, it wasn't the footage that broke containment. It was the pattern of erasure. The realization that someone, somewhere, had decided which memories were allowed to persist, and which were quietly escorted out of relevance. Yoon Menglong had disappeared physically. But digitally, he had multiplied. Because silence, once mapped, becomes louder than any voice. And Xin Qi stood at the center of that map, not as a spokesperson, not as a victim, but as a witness who refused to let the gaps close. The accounts were vanishing. But the story was not. And it never would be again. The silence didn't stay quiet. It learned how to echo. Once people understood that accounts weren't being deleted but thinned, the city itself seemed to participate. Screens flickered in cafes. Old posts refreshed and lost their captions mid-scroll. A comment would appear, then blink into nothing, leaving behind a hollow timestamp like a footprint with no foot. Xin Qi noticed it first in the small details. Her name stopped autofilling in search bars. Notifications arrived with no sender attached. Messages came through saying you have a reply, but opening them led nowhere. It felt like being spoken to from behind a wall that kept moving farther away. Then came the false resurrection. At 1:11 a.m., Yoon Menglong's primary account briefly reappeared. Not restored, rearranged. The profile photo was different. A stock image. The bio rewritten in bland corporate language that sounded nothing like him. Years of posts condensed into a single pinned statement praising growth, reflection, and privacy. The lie was clumsy. And that was the point. People realized this wasn't about erasing Yoon anymore. It was about rewriting him. Screenshots spread faster than the edit could stabilize. Side-by-side comparisons flooded timelines. The real Yoon, thoughtful and unfinished, next to the sanitized replacement that felt like a mannequin wearing his name. Xin Qi didn't react publicly. She waited. And in that pause, something extraordinary happened. An archivist collective, people who had never spoken to one another before, began releasing time-stamped proof of change. Not content, but transitions. GIFs showing captions dissolving. Videos of comment counts dropping in real time. Metadata shifts logged down to the second. It wasn't dramatic. It was forensic. The internet stopped speculating and started measuring. Someone coined another phrase that stuck just as hard as the first. Narrative laundering. Inside internal channels tied to the shadow infrastructure, panic escalated. The replacement profile had been meant to stabilize the situation, to give casual observers something neat to accept. Instead, it confirmed manipulation. Xin Qi received a message from an unverified account with no history and no avatar. They're testing how much of him they can change before anyone notices. She replied with a single word. Too late. That night, something slipped through the cracks. A platform-wide cache error caused fragments of deleted data to resurface briefly. Thumbnails, broken previews, partial captions. For less than 6 minutes, people could see pieces of posts Yoon had written in his final days. They weren't dramatic. They were mundane. A note about timing. A comment about doors closing too quietly. A saved lyric draft titled "If I Stop Answering." Those fragments did more damage than any accusation ever could. Because they proved continuity. Yoon hadn't been spiraling. He'd been organizing. Xin Qi finally spoke again, not in a statement, but in a live stream that many viewers couldn't access live due to unexplained connection issues. The ones who did recorded it immediately. She didn't mention names. She talked about memory. How disappearance works, she said calmly. It doesn't start with force. It starts with convenience. With systems deciding what's easier to forget. She held up her old phone. This device remembers him better than the platforms designed to remember everything. The stream cut out mid-sentence. But it was enough. The next morning, something unprecedented occurred. A whistleblower dashboard went live, anonymous, mirrored across dozens of servers. It visualized suppression patterns in real time. Viewers could type in a name and see reach decay curves, visibility throttles, interaction ceilings. Yoon Menglong's curve looked like a controlled demolition. Xin Qi's were starting to match it. People didn't panic. They adapted. Users began posting screenshots of their own throttled posts, tagging nothing, naming no one, just adding the same symbol Yoon had scratched into the wall. 4 short lines. 1 long. The symbol spread faster than language. Moderation systems didn't know what to do with it. Then came the blackout attempt. For 20 minutes, multiple platforms experienced synchronized outages. Official explanations blamed routine maintenance. But users noticed something strange when service returned. Search results felt different. Certain names resurfaced unexpectedly. Old posts regained captions. Archived interviews reappeared with restored metadata, including original upload times that contradicted official timelines. Someone had pushed back. Hard. A single message appeared on the whistleblower dashboard before it went dark again. They tried to erase a person. They exposed a process. Xin Qi received a final message from the same unverified account. They're moving from digital cleanup to human pressure. She already knew. Her latest post hadn't gone through. Neither had the next 5. Her account still existed, but the space around it had collapsed. She was shouting into an anechoic chamber designed to exhaust people into silence. Instead of retreating, she did something unexpected. She logged out. Completely. No farewell. No announcement. Her disappearance triggered more attention than her presence ever had. People searched for her and found nothing but cached fragments and screenshots taken seconds too late. They realized the erasure was accelerating, and that meant the window was closing. Then a final artifact surfaced. A scheduled post from Yoon, set to publish long after his disappearance. The system tried to suppress it, failed, then buried it so deeply only those looking for absences would find it. The post contained no words. Just an image. The same 2 shadows on concrete. But this time, someone had adjusted the contrast. Beneath the shadows, barely visible before, was a line scratched into the ground. You don't lose people. You lose permission to remember them. The image was taken down within minutes. But it was already everywhere. The attempt to control the narrative had collapsed into proof of its own existence. The more the system tried to smooth the story, the more fingerprints it left behind. Menglong was gone. Xin Qi was silent. But the machinery that tried to make that silence feel natural had been dragged into the light, piece by piece, gap by gap. And people finally understood the real danger wasn't disappearance. It was how quietly it could be engineered. The story no longer needed voices to continue. It had learned how to speak through what was missing.